Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving into something that's honestly a bit of a challenge for a lot of us, but a deeply encouraging one. We're going to enthusiastically tackle this massive cognitive dissonance that so many believers face when it comes to faith, grace, and our obedience to Yahweh. For those of us striving to walk the path of Torah, it's really time we reconciled the law and the Messiah and uncover what a truly empowered, obedient walk actually looks like.
To do that, we've got a pretty clear path today. We're going to look at the great contradiction, expose the impossible myth, redefine all things, dive into New Covenant mechanics, look closely at walking as Yahshua walked, and wrap up with true empowerment rather than an excuse.
All right, Section 1, the great contradiction. Philippians 4:13 verses this idea of an impossible law. We hear this from pulpits literally all over the globe, right? This frustrating, inconsistent narrative claiming that the commandments of Elohim are this heavy burden that no man can actually bear, a death sentence, an impossible standard.
And yet, you'll hear those exact same voices, without even a hint of irony, quote Philippians 4:13. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. I mean, you see it everywhere, on social media feeds, bumper stickers, stitched onto throw pillows. But pay attention to how it's used. It's almost exclusively applied as motivation for worldly stuff. You know, passing a math test, getting that big promotion at work, or crushing a personal fitness goal.
So here is the absolutely crucial question we have to ask ourselves. Does all things mysteriously exclude Yahweh's commandments? The cognitive dissonance here is just massive. Think about it. How can we claim a Messiah who gives us supernatural power to do all things, only to turn around and say that all things excludes the very instructions Yahweh gave us? Like, does his strength just suddenly shut off when it comes to keeping the Sabbath? No way. Absolutely not. Okay, Section 2, the impossible myth. Let's examine the biblical text. Because this whole argument that the Torah is impossible to keep, it's honestly just a myth. It's an unbiblical theology of inability that you literally will not find in the text itself.
This really illustrates the sharp contrast perfectly. On one hand, you have modern religious culture telling you the law is a yoke of bondage, a shattered chain you need to break free from. But on the other hand, you have Yahweh's actual truth declaring that his instruction is an open door. It's accessible, it's for our ultimate good, and yes, it is entirely doable.
Look at Deuteronomy chapter 30. Moses, speaking under the direct inspiration of Elohim, tells the people that this instruction is not too mysterious, and it's not far off. Think about the implications here. If his instructions were truly impossible, Yahweh would be a cruel tyrant, punishing his people for failing a standard he already knew they couldn't reach. But instead, our Father is perfectly righteous. He actually gives us the ability to choose obedience.
And Scripture even backs this up with real, historical examples of people succeeding at this. Take Luke 1:6, which talks about Zacharias and Elizabeth. They were righteous before Elohim. Now, if the law were genuinely impossible to keep, the word of truth absolutely would not and could not describe two human beings as walking blameless in all the commandments and ordinances of Yahweh.
Yet there it is.
Which brings us to Section 3, redefining all things. We need to properly understand the true power of Yeshua. What is his power actually meant to accomplish in our daily lives? Spoiler alert, it's not about bench pressing heavier weights or securing a corner office. It's about building endurance and righteousness for the kingdom. So if we confidently claim that Yahshua gives us the power to overcome sin, we've got to look at how the Bible actually defines sin. 1 John 3:4 makes it crystal clear. Sin is the transgression of the law, period. Therefore, if Yahshua strengthens us to stop sinning, he is, by absolute biblical definition, strengthening us to keep the Torah. To say he gives you strength but you still can't keep the law is basically saying the Messiah just isn't strong enough to help you stop sinning. Let that sink in.
All right, moving into Section 4, New Covenant Mechanics. This is where we look at the Torah being written on the heart. Because the biggest irony of this whole impossible law doctrine is that it completely ignores how the New Covenant actually works. Look right here at the beautiful promise in Jeremiah 31:33. The New Covenant doesn't throw out or change the content of the law, it changes its location. Yahweh promises to put his Torah in our minds and write it directly onto our hearts. He's literally giving us the internal hardware and power to perform it.
And Ezekiel confirms the mechanics of exactly how this happens. Yahweh says, I will put my spirit within you and cause you to walk in my statutes. He sends his Ruach HaKodesh for this specific purpose, to enable this walk.
Guys, calling the Torah impossible effectively insults the Spirit of grace. When you say you can't keep the law, you're essentially claiming that the very Spirit Yahweh put inside of you is incapable of causing you to walk in His ways.
Let's jump to section 5, walking as Yahshua walked. He is the perfect example. Listen, Yahshua did not come down here to hand us an excuse for disobedience. He came to be the ultimate, perfect example of obedience, and to empower us to follow 1 John 2:6, which explicitly commands us to walk just as He walked. Well, how exactly did He walk? He kept the Sabbath. He wore tzitzit. He ate clean food exactly as Elohim defined it. He faithfully observed the Moedim, the appointed times, and He never once transgressed the Torah. Never. So if we truly claim to have the mind and the strength of the Messiah, shouldn't our daily lives naturally and joyfully reflect His perfectly Torah-observant life?
Now, what about the cross? When people claim the law was nailed to the cross, they're vastly misunderstanding Colossians 2:14. It wasn't the law that was nailed there, it was the keragraphon. That's the handwritten record of debt, the penalty. Yeshua stepped in and paid the massive fine for our failure to meet the standard. And then He turned around and gave us the Spirit so we could finally start living by that standard.
Which seamlessly leads us to our final section, section 6, empowerment, not an excuse. Because we have to talk about this yoke mentioned by Peter in Acts 15. People constantly assume this means the Torah is an unbearable burden. But when you actually study the context of the Pharisaic culture back then, that burdensome yoke was absolutely not the Torah. It was the takanat. These were man-made, legalistic additions. They were heavy, extra rules and fences that religious leaders heaped onto the shoulders of the people. That's exactly what Yahshua was sternly rebuking in Matthew 23. The heavy burden was always the tradition of men, never the pure life-giving instructions of Elohim.
Just look at how the Apostle John sums it up in 1 John 5:3. For this is the love of Elohim, that we keep His commandments, and His commandments are not burdensome. Look at that direct conflict between modern culture and Scripture. The world will tell you it's impossible and heavy, but the Word tells you it is near to you and it is not a burden. So here is my direct challenge to you. Let's stop using Philippians 4:13 just to chase worldly success, and let's make it our absolute battle cry for righteous living. If we can truly do all things through Yahshua who strengthens us, then we can for sure keep the Sabbath. We can walk in purity. We can honor our Father by guarding His instructions. Through Yahshua, the impossible becomes our daily, empowered walk.
So as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a vital question to chew on. If true empowerment means living like our Messiah, are you finally ready to embrace the true freedom found in His instructions? Because the very end of the book makes the reward of an empowered walk perfectly clear. Blessed are those who do His commandments, that they may have the right to the tree of life, and may enter through the gates into the city.